Morning, everybody. Welcome to Phos4G UK Local 2023. Thanks very much for coming. We've got a really good day scheduled, so I'm just going to quickly run through some introduction stuff, and then we're going to hand over to the sort of the national stream for this event. So for those of you who are not aware, this is one of kind of several national local chapters of the same event. So some of the sessions today are going to be streamed to all venues, and then they're going to have speakers here doing stuff for us as well. So big thanks first of all to CGI for sponsoring this event. So they helped out with the venue and catering costs. Wouldn't be able to do this sort of thing because Phos4G is a sort of not-profit volunteer-based organisation. Thanks very much for the volunteers as well, Judith and Kevin and the guys from Swansea. I forgot your name, sorry, but they're both sitting at the back over there, so you can ask them for stuff throughout the day. I'm Tom Colley from Welsh Government, so I'm the venue chair. So just some housekeeping. There's no fire drills, so if you hear a fire alarm, you exit through the main entrance. Toilets signposted just outside there. I haven't actually been to them, but they can't be far away. There's a coffee and tea and everything. Lunch will be provided in the room. There's a cafe just to the right as you walk out of the door if you need to purchase any other refreshments. I think that's about all I need to say. So agenda, going to hand over, as I say, for a national welcome and a keynote speech, which will be streaming at 10:45, then 10:15 to 12:45. We've got 4 brilliant local talks, which you can see on the screen there, with a coffee break in the middle. This afternoon, we've got a talk that's been streamed just to us, but Rupert isn't able to make it down, so he's going to be streaming that in about some work that he's been doing, which sounds really good. Then we go back to the national stream for a keynote talk and then a panel session. So should all go well. What could go wrong? Finishing off at 4:45 with the option for going to the pub from 5 o'clock. So I think I'll leave it there and try and set us up with the stream to this other meeting. Bear with me. go. Over to you, Paul.
Okay, cheers, Tom. Thanks to Tom, of course, for giving me the opportunity to have a chat with you this year, which is fantastic. I've been in this OSGO for a few years now, the same as Tom and the same as a few of the others. And hopefully you might find this interesting as long as I can get to work this. Okay, so what I'm going to discuss today is open source, updating an open source mobile working practice, because we already had open source within the authority, and we go. Okay, sorry, yeah. So we already had it set up, so we're just updating from where we were several years ago. So I put a little caption on there. This progress has little to do with speed, but much to do with direction, and that really sums us up, as you'll see as we go through, because we're just basically a small organization. We've recently changed our marketing campaign, and you've seen the banner, Brachanioka logo, and everything else over the last few months. So effectively, we were left with we've essentially got 130 people as members of staff, and we've got 4 people in IT. So there's myself doing GIS. We've got somebody doing security, somebody doing hardware, and we've got a developer now. So things are looking much better. A bit about me, I've jumped the gun a little bit. So I was a student of this college, actually, funny enough, when it was called West Glamorgan Institute of Higher Education back in 1982-84. And I did design here, graphic design. So I then became a chartered designer before I stepped into local government. I also became a circuit board inspector, planning technician, cartographer, etc. But the key thing about this slide is that I had a design background coming into mapping. And that was quite a help, because you encounter things like layout and typography and color. And I think they're essential things when you go into mapping. And that's how I got into mapping many years ago, because I was already a graphic designer. I could see maps were coming in, and I just decided that was the way to go for me. So I've got a little blog as well with my own name. So I put up some stuff that I'm learning, and I put it up on the blog at the same time. So if anybody else is in the same boat as me, then they can follow along and try and iron out some of the issues. So just a bit of a backstory here. I started, well, Phos4G, as we know, in the UK, kind of started in 2013. In Wales, it started, we had the first meeting in the Brecon Beacons National Park HQ back in 2013. And that was with Kev and I think Sean and a few others who came to that meeting. And it was a result of the 2013 Phos4G event that was on that year. I think it was the first one in the UK, but I stand corrected if I'm wrong. So in 2016, then I joined BBMPA from Leith Talbot and began to tweak the solutions that were already in place. And I was beginning to listen to users' requests. Half were already with you. Yes?
So there's talk on at the moment. Got a break.
Sorry about that. So half of the people in the park were already using QGIS. They were quite happy with it, and the other half wanted us to move away from QGIS and use Google Earth. They wanted us to use KML and KMZ for basically everything. And why couldn't we have PostGIS push everything into KML? 2018 came along. We introduced ODK Collect. This was the first app that we pushed out to the park, and we decided that we would try it out in the volunteers. So we did a project where we were looking at trying to find suitable walks which were good for people with disabilities. And we used this thing called ODK, which we were recommended by Aberystwyth University. They'd come across it, was open source, and we thought we'd give it a try. And it went disastrous. The reason for that is ODK, the way we set it up, was far too complex. We made a lot of assumptions that people would understand what GIS was, and it turns out it was a hard sell. So the walks were never completed, things moved on, people moved on, and it was generally felt that it was a bit too complex for the volunteers. So in 2020, pressure from ArcGIS Online came along, and I was sent a URL to set up my ArcGIS And I decided not to. I thought to myself, why? Yes, it's a free tool and it's an entry into the more complex and more expensive parts of the system. But I thought, well, I don't want it. And I was kind of making a decision for myself, not for the park. 2021, 22, we had open source. We decided to have an open source first strategy, and basically no one complained that they weren't using ArcGIS online. So I was quite happy about that. And we were lucky at the time because Datamap Wales was just being developed, and I knew I could rely on the Welsh Government to back my decision if it came to it. So here we go. This was the Esri screen they sent me. Further enhance your experience. And they wanted us to comply with the partnership, of course, and ask no questions and sign up. So I decided I'm not going to further my experience. And the reason for that is I like failure, I like success, I like community, I like experimentation and problem solving, but above all, choice. And that's the key thing running through here. The choice to swap out components as technology advances or project support slows, or may even be discontinued. That ability to be able to take out a component that's not working for you and substitute it with something that you know perhaps will work through knowing what your colleagues are doing, I think is invaluable. So that's what we did. But the main thing that was coming from the management was that we needed to collect evidence of global warming, global change, and we had to start using GIS seriously. So the rationale was simple. Evidence must be collected transparently using open standards and open data wherever possible, and to make available for scrutiny in particular, reproducibility along with the algorithms used so that we can learn from the process and improve it in the future. And I think that's important because if we produce any analysis, we should be able to simply be able just to get that out there and be able to have it reproduced by someone if they need to. So, of course, there are many GI systems out there and many cloud solutions that replicate algebra, remote sensing capabilities. So the problem wasn't a budget one, it was an attitude one. We've got plenty of capital budget, which we could have used to buy Esri software, but to me, there was a lot of pressure at the time to go down the Esri route because everybody else, all the other big agencies were using it, and why weren't we using it? Simple as that. So we decided amongst the four of us to keep everything in-house. Difficult decision because we're a small group, but we found consultants were expensive, and the one we were using at the time was really expensive. They never reveal their methodology, never seem to be available when you have an urgent problem. If you want change, it's costly, and they're more interested in bigger contracts and bigger clients. So some ecologists were coming into us who were calling themselves consultants, but of course, knew nothing about GIS. I found that a little bit strange as you're coming to work in a park. So I was constantly getting email from these consultants. Well, how do we do this? How do you use QGIS? What tool do I use to do this? And in the end, you kind of ended up doing the stuff for them. And I thought to myself, well, how stupid is that? Here I am working for somebody else, doing the work for the consultants, and they take the credit for it. So let's rebuild our system, I thought. We've already got Postgres and we've got PostGIS in situation already. We've already got GeoServer and PGAdmin. We've got all the tools that we really need in a sense. And we could have pushed everything out with just web services. But what we decided to do was take a slightly different route and mix and match in a way. So for example, if you look at the first one down, we're still keeping QGIS. And I think it's important that we keep QGIS. But we've added one thing that I think will augment what GeoServer is doing, and that is giving the QGIS projects a back end. So effectively, QGIS Server was the solution for that. It isn't in as much development at the moment because I think it's slowed down a little bit, but I didn't want to put that in the way, if you like. So that was the first thing, component to put in, was keep QGIS as it was. People were using QGIS. There were some complex systems and triggers in PostGIS that we had to stick with because it would mean people effectively realigning their jobs to focus on any changes. So, for example, rights of way were very set in the way they worked, and they wouldn't really take any changes. So we didn't want to alienate them too quickly. So what we did was instead of using the old ODK software, we decided to change over to a similar model, which is called Kobo Collect. And as it happens, there's a little plugin for QGIS called Q Real-Time, which allows you to take your your PostGIS tables, push them up to Kobo Cloud, and then you can create a form from that, and then you can push the form out, and the data comes back from your handheld device through the plugin back into QGIS. So we didn't realize that at the time. It's only when I found the Q Real-Time plugin I realized how we could fit it all together. So Kobo Toolbox is now in the process. Q Real-Time taking stuff out to Kobo server, collect stuff in the field. But this was only a solution in my mind that would work for the volunteers. We got volunteers, we got wardens, and we got staff. So we've got three kind of different sections of people that we need to cater for. So the volunteers, we knew we'd have a bit of a problem with, because you can't assume they're GIS ready. We can't assume they've done a survey before, but they've got lots of enthusiasm, and they've got they really want to learn as well. So we put Kobo Collect out to the volunteers. We created a very simple form. We had some work that needed to be done in the peatlands up on the mountainsides, and they were very keen to get going with it. So initially we started with the ODK format, and we just put an Excel spreadsheet on Google, okay, just to get started, just to see if the whole thing would work. And they went out in the field, they took all their data, they collected it all, and the following week there was uproar. It didn't work. That's the only feedback I got. It just didn't work. I said, well, give me a reason why it doesn't work. And they said, well, it's too complicated. And they went into various reasons in this, and I suddenly thought, this isn't really a problem with the software. It's a problem with their understanding of what they're doing. And we added a little bit of training in, a little bit late, I must admit, but we did add it in, and we found that once they'd had the training, they went back out in the field and they found it great. The problem I got now is I can't get them onto Kobo Toolbox because they're so used to ODK, and they're happy with it. And it's still pointing on Google, which shouldn't happen. But it was only meant to be a temporary method, and it was going to probably have a few tweaks to be made to it, and then we'd follow it on. So we've already had the tools. If you look at the left-hand side, this is reported. This is the public rights-of-way reporting tool. This was already in place, but it is broken. We had a development recently to fix it for us. It's something I wasn't involved with. It was too complicated for me to look at, to be honest, and I couldn't fix the problem. So in the meantime, we're happy with Kobo Toolbox, and we want to get QField out as well, because QField really is for the warden service, as you can see on the slide. We wanted them to be able to take their QGIS projects out in the field, because the first thing they complained about is we don't have OS maps. They were paying for OS maps through the portal, where you pay for 6 months, I think, and then you get full use of it. And we said, well, look, we've got an OS agreement with the OS. So why don't we just prepackage the maps into geopackage format, bung them on your phone? You have to. The only thing was they had to put a folder from their from that I would supply them with onto their phones. And okay, they found that a bit difficult, but we got through the problem. Once they started using it for a few weeks, they were more than happy with it. They thought, this is brilliant. My maps come up when there's no network. Isn't that brilliant? Because we just pre-packed. It was just a simple solution. And then, of course, they wanted more layers added, and we started to have to pack the extra layers they required on the device rather than have them come through PostGIS. But they're happy with it at the moment, and we need to look at that in the future to make sure it works a little bit better than that. I think I've covered everything on there. Yeah. Oh, the other thing was, of course, there was one element missing. We were playing around with RStudio to try and get dashboards and the analysis done in a nice interactive way. That came to a head because that was kind of halted for a little bit. And we looked at Looker Studio from Google, which provided me with a nice quick interface to quickly draw the data from the collection methods into an instant kind of dashboard. When you're given about a few hours notice, that's about the only choice you've got, really, because we didn't have anything else in place. So let's have a look at a solution that I'm going to take forward. It was a hard decision because I knew Welsh Government were working on Data Map Wales, and I knew that was, am I right thinking it's Mapstore and GeoNode? Am I right, Kev? Yeah. So I think I was looking at it roughly at the same time as these guys were, but once I realized Welsh Government were working on it, I backed off because it's going to be in place, it's going to be used, and I can push people towards Data Map Wales to get the data they want if it's not available through our PostGIS store. So we looked at QGIS Web Client, and for me, and this is just a personal thing, but taking into account people's abilities in GIS, I thought we need something fairly simple so they could print off OS maps if they needed to, do a few little bits of small analysis, and strip away as much of it as I could, and just have web services in there. So that hasn't been thrown out yet. It is in production. It is ready to go, but we have one or two little slight issues with it. So this slide is just to show you how accurate and how easily you know, and how well it performs in terms of making the data look the same in both platforms, which I think is important if you're into cartography and you want symbology and you want text and you want everything that you set up in QGIS to look the same when you put it out. Again, you can do a lot of this with SLD and various other things, but we decided on this route. Here's a closer look at it. You've got a nice little sliding door effect there where you can look at two layers. One of the things I wanted was a good legend view, which is so important because when you're trying to explain something to somebody, if you just show them the results of supervised classification or something similar, they won't know what the hell you're talking about. So that's just a close-up there of how that looks. It's just got a simple search field in it, a couple of simple tools, but everything is mainly on the top right-hand side in the little burger menu, and you've got a couple of tools on the bottom as well. So you can also put a QGIS server front end on your web service, which just basically looks at the QGIS projects that you've already set up in QGIS server. And you've got all the little metadata links and the browse links and so on. That's already made up. That is somebody else's version of it because I haven't got to this stage yet. But that's what it would look like. It's very easy to scroll through the data, and you can see it visually as well. So I think that makes a lot of sense to people then. Another thing we looked at was QGIS Web, JustQuick. JustQuick was a project that's been around for a few years, but it's kind of dwindled a little bit in terms of development. So I thought, I've only got QGIS to Web plugin with QGIS to work with. So what else is out there? So I found JustQuick. So I signed up, and I think I put a couple of things up on GitHub to get out, try and understand how it worked. And I found it the most easy to use interface because you send your project from your QGIS project through the plugin up onto their server. But it was so natural and easy to understand that I thought, right, I'll put a couple more projects up on there just to see how people react. And in general, the reaction to JustQuick has been pretty good. Not the one I'm probably going to end up going with, but nevertheless, a viable option for us in the future, potentially. This one is another temporary one, putting up a grid of 100-meter blocks for the peatland volunteers to go out and use the grid itself to try and align as best they can with their GPS receivers and their survey points. So one of the uses of QGIS to Web, I like it. I think it's, again, development has slowed down on that, as far as I understand. But it still works, and with 322. Another thing we tried, we've established is a little program called WebODM, which is Open Drone Map. I don't know if anybody's come across this, but it's a great little tool. It stitches all your images together from your drone. We bought about a handful of, I think we bought about 4 Phantom 4s, which we did a bit of training on, and then we pushed them out to the volunteers to take out on site on our own land and see how they got on. In fact, they loved it. They did the qualifications with the organisation that I can't think where they're going now. So they did their qualifications through that, and we were away. So again, it's something I found that we didn't want to pay for it. So it's twofold. It's such as images, resulting as a 3D LiDAR data measurement tool. You can archive as well with it, which was one of the reasons why we wanted it. And you could download everything as in a single package, which you could then open in QGIS. So that was great. And this is a little screenshot of what it looks like. It's a ready-made tool, as I said. It's very simple to use. There's a nice little easy dashboard on there. The tools are very simple. And this one just shows one of the stones that I've manifested in Brecon Beacons. And the idea with this was that we could use it as an archive of some sort, so we could see the condition of the stone, whether it was getting damaged through the years or whether it was sinking in its foundations, and so on. So that gives us a nice little tool there and this is open for the volunteers to go in and use and play around with. Again, you can see on the top of this slide there's a chip in the stone, which is one of the prompters for us to use a tool that we could say, well, look, if we get a nice close-up of a nice 3D image of the condition of the stone, we can go back to it in a year or two, and then we can see if there's any change, and then maybe do another flight. So again, I'm old-fashioned. I still like grass. I love grass. I think it's probably the best. If I had one GIS only, it would be grass, because it's got all the tools you need. It works well with Postgres and PostGIS, and it does some fantastic visualizations, in particular water runoffs and watersheds and so on. So if you do get a chance to use it, it seems very complicated to get into. Once you get into it, you can use it through the command line. You can use it through GUI. You can use it through Jupyter Notebooks. You can use it in all kinds of ways, because it's the modules themselves that are the important thing. And this is a module called Our Watershed, and it reveals how water flows down the mountains, obviously, and where our watersheds are. This wasn't done in QGIS; it's just purely done in grass. But of course, you can put it into QGIS with the plugin. We've been doing a bit of interaction with Richard Lucas from Aberystwyth University and with the, I think it's called Welsh Data Cube. And we've been doing some tutorials with Aberystwyth to try and see how we can use the data that they're producing for us in web map format, web map service format. So I just quickly, and people didn't realize there was a 3D element to QGIS, so this kind of introduces them to the 3JS plugin and the 3D view, just to show them what it can do. And they were quite gasped, because they thought, oh, QGIS, I thought you could only edit parts in it, or, they don't realize how much power is in it. And we can introduce that power as time goes on, as they get more confident. So we went into a serious thing about where we get to with the mobile working, with the mobile tools. I think I've jumped the gun on this, actually. The big problem was, of course, we didn't have network connectivity, and there were concerns about warden safety. They needed to see boundaries, they needed to update their conditions in the field, and so on. QField, as I said earlier, was the solution. The geo package was the first step on that. We did look at QGIS Cloud as well. Now, QGIS Cloud is kind of an extension of QField, but it's a paid cloud version. If you go for the free version, I think you have to allow your data to be open to the world, basically. So there was a bit of pushback with that, because we didn't want to put the data out to the world, and they didn't want to pay anyway. So it was back to QField again on its own. But we did, of course, use the sync plugin for QGIS, which allows you to sync the projects when they come back in. So another tool we did was the Craigenhorst ground management tool, and this is a simple way. They wanted a way to be able to, when they're working on the paths and when they're putting concrete down, or when they're mending the paths and doing various things, they're putting finger posts in or whatever, they needed a tool to be able to monitor and see how that was going on. So we just basically did a run around with a GPS on the paths, broke them up into 5-meter sections, and then we just allowed them to just pick a 5-meter section or 2 or 3 5-meter sections, and then just say, okay, these are the 3-meter sections that we're going to tarmac over, or we're going to put gravel down, or whatever it was. And again, we're just running a web feature service through that. And we're lucky within Craigenolls Park because it's got a fairly good network anyway. But of course, if you go outside the park, it gets a bit less good. So just two little screenshots. Another thing we did in the park is we broke the whole park up into hexagonal polygons so that they could, without defining a polygon itself, they could pick areas they wanted to work on and give them a status. So they could look at this grid in its total area at any point and see where the work is going on and what status it's at. Nice little project. But again, it's waiting for that point where I can get in to see the manager and get it out. On the right-hand side, you've got Kobo. This is how easy it looks. You just fill in a blank form. When you finish answering the questions on the form, you send the form back straight to the server. I think I've got a few pictures further on how it looks if you've never come across it. Here we are. This is the kind of thing you can do with it. You can do a lot of mathematical sort of background scripts and so on. You can add. It's just Excel. If you're any good at Excel, you can probably understand what's going on there. But yeah, you just put into a cell the formula that you need to give you the results, and it does the job. The people and volunteers are using it. They love it, and they don't want to part with it. Another project, again, I don't know what I'm doing for time. Is working with the Brecon Beacons Park Society, and we've got an old guy there. He's 75 years old, and he still uses QGIS. He's been using it for several years, and I think, well, what a testament to QGIS and the ways going forward. So this was just to show how they wanted to monitor tram roads through the park, and they wanted their own customized symbology. They wanted every point numbered. On the right side, you can see there how we pre-packed the OS maps so they can go out and site with them, just in a single geo package. And again, you can put links for documents and so on. This is a straight document to a Word, link to a Word document with some of the database information in it. So when they're out on site, they can quickly flick from one to the other to see and refer to the documentation on that site or point. So we have had some drawbacks. Workflow integration isn't where I want it to be, in the sense that, yes, we've got all of these things working. We've got some parts of it working, but the whole workflow needs to be relooked at, in my opinion. We need to automate a lot of stuff with FME. I've been putting that off for a long time. And of course, some of the managers are already looking at, well, we want to model some of the things that we're doing and try and get some sense out of them and so on. And of course, metadata and data on data map Wales has got to be in that mix as well. So a couple of future disruptors which we are looking at, keeping an eye on, OpenAI, Google, Cesium. Cesium is of interest to me because we are working in such an interesting park and with so much great topology and so on. AVR, VR advances, drone robotics, we keep an eye on that as well. So again, we're being pushed towards Jupyter Notebooks through Aberystwyth because it's an easy way of getting I don't know if you're familiar with Jupyter Notebooks, but essentially they're just Python. And they allow you to basically make reports, put your text in there, it's Markdown. And you can just do your live coding inside cells. Great idea. Pushing that onto staff is going to be a hard sell because it is very much hit or miss. I think the kernels and the various things that work within, I'm trying to think, maybe the way they've got it set up, I'm not sure at Aberystwyth, but it does fail quite a bit when you're trying to do something. So I think that failure might translate into, oh, it's too difficult to use and we don't want this, but we're going to try it anyway. We're going to see how far we can go with it and see what we do, see how we get. Again, I'm looking at Cesium, as I said. And R, I've been playing around with. I like R. To be honest, I didn't learn Python at the start. I did go straight into R, and I quite liked it because it seemed to me to be quite simple to do the basic things like connect to PostGIS and so on. So, and of course, you've got all of the QGIS algorithms and GRASS algorithms, which you can pull into R. So again, I'd like to do more work on that, but time is just impossible with just me doing it. So in summary, of course, still learning after 30 years. There isn't a perfect solution for everything we do. Not everyone shares my enthusiasm. Skill sets for geospatial are dwindling. People are less interested in knowing the likes of QGIS. They want something that's just push a button once on my iPhone. I don't care what it does in the background, just as long as I get a result. Nobody really wants to understand the algorithms and the various things that go on in the background. And I noticed that the last 3 years, really. So just to remind everybody again, I like failure, success, community experimentation, problem solving above all choice. Maybe it's a little bit personal and a little bit biased there, but for me, it's why I'm still working. I think that's the last slide. Yeah. Any questions? It's a lot there. Yeah.
Just a quick question.
Yeah.
Q-Field.
Yeah.
I was seeing ROE a few months ago. They're not using Q-Field. They're using merging maps.
Yes. Same. Well, I call it the same thing. It isn't the same thing, or is it? I don't know.
Did you look at other options? Q-Field.
Merging was an option.
Yeah.
Merging, and I think they do a free starter, don't they?
Yeah.
Yeah. They do. Who knows? But they're happy with Q-Field at the moment. So again, who knows? That may change in a year's time. We may be forced down the Esri route in a year's time. Who knows? I hope not. In fact, that can be a measure for you, because if I come here next year, you know we're still on open source. If I'm not here, you know why.
Thanks very much, Paul. That was brilliant. Really interesting. I left Neath Port about 5 years ago, and I've still got a rights way officer emailing me asking when Welsh Government are going to sort out their mobile surveying tool, so that you can get off their unnamed supplier. So I'm just going to point him to you now. You know who he is anyway. I'm just going to tell him to email you for everything he needs from now on. Brilliant.
Yeah.
There's about a minute lag on YouTube, but it should pick up.
So if someone can talk, can you borrow it?
Yeah, sure.
If you can just like,
Okay.
What do you think? Was it all?
I think it's all okay. I think it's just a lag.
Yeah.
Can you hear me speaking on there as well?
When that
Yeah. Oh, there we go.
picks up, it's been picking up voice like that all the way through.
All right. Yeah.
Hello. Testing. Hello. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I think I'm sorry. As long as it's
Just to check the voice. Yeah, it's sensor and then it's left on the screen.
Good.
I can definitely hear it in the room now. Anything coming through outside? Keep talking. Hello.
It's a rendition of favorite karaoke number.
Forgotten more than my students.
Picking up you on the phone. Picking up that.
Is this any better? Got the microphone set to max hub on the laptop. Still talking. Sounds okay in the room. Too far away from this one.
Too far away. But she's picking it up now. Okay.
Even if this wasn't picking it up, that should.
No.
okay, no,
That's right.
this is a standalone just like that.
Yeah.
So let's say I do talking, this picks your own voice.
Yeah. So do you think it was too far away from this? Without being able to try this one?
Yeah, but you can use it as a handheld, so it doesn't matter.
Yeah. I was just thinking when it
Streams it going through that mic there.
So as the stream is that.
Yeah.
unless it was doing something weird where it was doing the noise cancellation.
Yeah.
Because you think that even if I was over here, you think that one would have been picking me up, wouldn't you?
Just a quick one.
I think there are noise cancellation settings on Jitsi that you can turn off. I'm just thinking if it's registering it twice and then just cancelling it out.
Cancel it.
I can't think of any other reason why voice wouldn't be going through on the stream.
We're working there, though.
Just now, yeah.
Coming through that. It's working on the screen.
Monitor it while Josh is.
Oh, Josh.
That's down, Josh.
Because this is because it's a taster account, it doesn't have full access to the full WAP. Takes me back. It should be fine once everyone.
Cool. Yeah, we'll give it a go with this session, and yeah,
We'll put it here, right in the middle, so that the pickup is okay.
Yeah, so you can see that's registering when we talk. That's fine.
Yeah.
And that was picking up brilliantly for YouTube in the last talk. So if you talk with this one, that's the registering.
As long as that is the main microphone for the YouTube.
Yeah, YouTube just gets streamed out of Jitsi, so it should be using Jitsi samples. Oh, thank you very much. So you're gonna drop the mic at the end.
They'll have to for regular.
Yeah, don't drop the mic at the end.
Cool. Okay, so
That's what we want, right?
Okay, thanks everyone. Going into the next talk now, which is Josh Henley from Data Map Wales team in Welsh Government. So over to you, Josh.
Thanks, Tom. Bore da pawb. I'm Josh Henley. I'm a member of the Data Map Wales team from Welsh Government. Not heard back. Better? Okay, yeah. And I'm here today to talk to you about the engagement tool that we've developed for Data Map Wales. Hence the funny title, You're So Spatial, Let's Get Engaged. Thank you, Tom, for that one. Better? Cool, right here. So, if you're not familiar with Data Map Wales, it's basically what it says on the tin, so it's data on maps in Wales. We've got lots of different types of data on there, from open government license data, PSGA data, to really quite locked down, restricted sort of data sets, like related to vulnerable households for use with Jigsaw app, to allow emergency planners, emergency responders to plan evacuations, that kind of thing. So, like I say, today I'll be talking about the engagement tool. So we'll have a quick look at the timeline, developments carried out so far on the tool itself, and some future developments before closing remarks and key takeaways of the brief Q&A. I think we're a little bit behind on time, so I'll try to claw some time back as I go along. As you can see, there's a QR code on the screen there, so feel free to scan the QR code, or you can use the URL just beneath, datamap.gov.wales/survey/possible-G-travel. And that's just a link there to the survey tool itself. So you can just get a little quick taster. I'll show that in a moment, so I'll give you a chance just to scan that if you like to follow along. And what you should see there then is the engagement tool on Data Map Wales. So it's just a quick survey just to tell us where you've come from today and how you got here. So very simply, scan and zoom to your locality and just stick a pin on the map there. Oops. And indicate how you got here today, just to give you some familiarity with the engagement tool. See there, if I hit submit now, got my response submitted, I can start the response if needs be, and we'll take a bit more, look at that in a bit more detail in a moment. Cool. I think Tom has done a little bit of work to set up a workbench, maybe not, to reveal the results of that survey. So I'll give him a chance, maybe at the end we'll have a look and see if those responses have come through, and we can take a look at those then as a spatial layer on Data Map Wales. So I'll carry on then. So in terms of the timeline for the engagement tool, it all started way back in middle of 2021. We were approached by the active travel team in Welsh Government. Active travel team from across local authorities in Wales wanted to go out to the public to carry out consultations on active travel schemes, and they were using a platform Commonplace, and we were approached to create embedded maps as iframes so that they could embed those within this Commonplace tool. We sort of noticed then the limitations in that, which was the start of us deciding to do a discovery on our offering for the engagement tool, so that we could do it all ourselves, really. So the first iteration really before that came with National Forest. So National Forest policy team approached us to conduct a survey of the public across Wales so that we could collect responses about where users across Wales, members of the public, would want to see trees planted in their area. And it gathered a bit more information. Obviously, we had no concept of this at the time, so we had to do this all from scratch, making use of Django. We'll talk about that in a bit more detail shortly. We moving on then to the second sort of iteration. We've engaged with Cadu recently, so starting last year, I think. Long journey, but we'll get there. So yeah, further improvements came with Cadu and things around sort of validations to ensure the accuracy of the data. Again, we'll look at that in a bit more detail. And that takes us through to summer 2023 now, where we've had some further improvements in terms of automating response layers, we might see later, and looking to the future. Again, after travel we're in talks with to talk about further developments. We've been approached recently by, I think, Transport for Wales, to talk about sort of EV charging infrastructure, that kind of thing. So lots of discussion going on and lots of use for the tool. So pre-engagement, or pre the development of this engagement tool, like I say, we were creating these embedded maps for active travel so that they could embed these on Commonplace. So it allowed for sort of the table of contents and feature information panel to display, but there were limitations, so you couldn't change base maps on there, you couldn't display overlay layers, and couldn't interact with those overlay layers, so you couldn't select, say, a feature on the map or drop a pin, and you couldn't sort of pull attribute information or what have you as part of a response. So it was really just there for displaying information, spatial information, and then they were collecting responses using standard sort of question types. So we did some text bike and looked into the use of Django, an open source data package that we could start to build our own engagement tool. So that was using Django form surveys and see what was available out of the box and how we could customize that and build on it really to make improvements. So we were approached then by National Forest, and that gave us the chance to implement the Django form surveys module and start to build our engagement tool. Their only sort of real requirements was to be able to drop a pin on a map. So you could capture coordinates, but there are no sort of constraints on there in terms of validations. So we did get some data from users, almost like protest votes, if you like, users who dropped pins in the Irish Sea or over the border in England. It gave us some sort of basic question types, radio buttons, drop downs, that kind of thing. You can see on the screenshot there, you've got brief description and some checkboxes. We can display layers, so you can see in the corner of that picture there, you've got the table of contents button, but we couldn't interact with layers. It was for view only, so we couldn't select features still. And that was our first sort of real chance to carry out an engagement. So we got about 1,458 responses on that survey. Quite a long time period, really. It was a really successful engagement, and it gave us a chance to try it out, really. Fast forwarding to sort of the last year or so then, we started liaising with Cadu. And this is our second sort of attempt to make some improvements to the engagement tool. So we introduced validations. So validations on the zoom level, so users are forced to zoom to a certain zoom level, a certain scale to ensure greater accuracy. We introduced layer validations to ensure that features from the map could be selected. And also introduced feature validations so that you could specify specific features from a layer had to be selected. So, for example, if you're looking at properties, then you could define that there has to be a residential property type. We also introduced feature information question types so that you can pull through information as part of a response. So when you select a feature on a map, it will pre-populate fields. And we've done some work recently to introduce an image uploader, as well as a locate me prompt to sort of make it a bit easier for users to get to the location. I share my screen, take a look at the condition monitoring format. So this is in draft at the moment, as you can tell by the sort of placeholder text there. But this will give you an idea of the sort of functionalities that's been developed for Cadw. So as you can see, you've got your embedded map there, and if I select a point on the map, very far away, it's going to tell me I need to zoom in before selecting scheduled monuments. So that text is also configurable. And if I head to an area, so we've actually done some work on the search gazetteer config to make sure that features from specific layers can be pulled through to there. So if I start typing in one of the scheduled monuments, it'll bring that up. So users can search by scheduled monument ID or name. If I select middle of nowhere, it's telling me I need to select a scheduled monument. So obviously I'm past that zoom level validated, but I've not clicked on an actual feature. And when I do select a feature properly, it's telling me that I've selected my location. And it's pre-populated with all those fields there, so you can ensure that accuracy there. We've specified that you can have mandatory fields, again, to ensure great accuracy with the data. Added date widget pickers, date picker widgets rather, and the image uploader there. And all of that, like I say, increases the accuracy of the data that we are encouraging users to upload for us. We've also done some work to automate this process of generating survey responses as a spatial layer. So we've been using FME desktop to create workbenches to automate that process, and then use an FME server to run that on a schedule. And I think we're going to do some work in the future to improve that further so that it's run whenever a submission is put in, rather than just being run on a time schedule. We've also had to do some work there to sort of format the feature information nicely. So like I say, this is generating a layer which is available then on Bitmap Wales for users to go into and export if need be. Some work was done to make the read-only feature information panel that pops up when you select a feature on the map. To format them more nicely. So prior to this, I think the images were only displayed as URLs. So the challenges around pick lists and checkboxes, and that has to be manipulated so the data displayed correctly. So we've got about 25 surveys we've done so far. Some choice ones we've got there, sort of a Bridgend active travel survey we're approached to do. So we had about 221 users who visited that survey and 226 responses. I think because there was a prize incentive on offer from Bridgend, I think a tablet, there was a great incentive for users to submit and submit multiple responses perhaps. We've recently done a digital inclusion survey, so allowing public sector bodies to tell us about their digital inclusion offering. We had about 113 users there, 188 responses, I think possibly some duplication, but a lot of it I think down to users providing information for multiple libraries, say within their county. So in terms of the future, we are going to be looking at a moderation process for improving survey responses so that they can then be made publicly available. So like I say, Transport Wales have approached us, and that's something that they're interested in. Something else we've been asked for is a map per question rather than a map per survey. So I think Active Travel have raised this a couple of times where they'd like to be able to ask users to stick a pin on a map where they want to see benches, say, along an active travel route, and they also want to get locations for, say, drop curves, that kind of thing. And it'd be nice to be able to display multiple maps within that one survey rather than having lots of surveys to capture all that information. The validation models we've used are being reused across the site. So for more sort of general data collection on the map, so we use the same sort of validations when users are now editing data on the map. We've made some improvements there. So non-GIS users who aren't used to editing data in tables and the sort of the feature grid on the map there, we've simplified that process now so that they can go into edit mode, select a feature, and then they're presented with form fields, and some validations can be used for that as part of some work we've done for land-based decarbonisation. And we've also looked at allowing users to capture lines or polygons as part of survey. So previously it's only been possible to drop a pin or create a point feature. Good. Now, going forward, I think we'll be able to capture lines or polygons as part of survey responses. Like I say, parallel, we've been improving the data editing at Data Lab Wales. You can see there now what was formerly always a read-only feature info panel is now editable. So when you go into edit mode, you present these form fields, and it's possible to use widgets, drop-downs, and checkboxes, etc., to edit feature information through forms via the map on Map Store. So which gives us more flexibility going forward. So it might be that the survey tool is more predominantly used for mobile sort of surveys. This is more used for perhaps, so the editable feature information is more used for internal or desktop-based exercises. The maps are more suited to sort of complex data collection and simpler fields, whereas the surveys are better for complex fields and less complex maps. And in future, it might be that the two merge, so the surveys don't sit on Django pages, but are integrated more into Map Store, which I think is an ambition for us really to sort of do it all through our one-stop map. So yeah, basically in summary, it's all about engaging with users and collecting accurate data, accurate spatial data, and to that end, we've introduced validations, the mapping elements, obviously, pre-camera responses to ensure that that's possible. DL Power. Oh, we do have one last survey you can see there. So it's the Phospho-G Pin the Pub. Obviously, if you get a chance over lunch to stretch your legs, go for a walk, you might want to scope out the pub that is booked for later on. I think it's called Beerith. So if you scan the survey there, I'll just see if I've got it available as well. So again, so if you've got a few different validators on here, so if I zoom right out, you can see there's a validation to tell me that's not a building. I think this is the venue we're in. I zoom right in there. I have to ignore the success message and scroll down a wee bit to see that your answer is wrong. This is the conference venue, and you're about 374 meters from the venue. We'll see who can get the correct answer in first, perhaps. And there is an image uploaded there, so you can take a picture of the pub. We'll see who gets the right answer first. So yeah, Dilton Valley Power. If there are any questions, I have to say your hand. Oh, brilliant. So the Tom just told me the responses to the travel survey should be there now. Well, so we've got a good spread. I'll display this in the full map. Cool. So we've got myself from North Wales here. We've got a few from over the border, Plymouth. Just like that feature, we can see that they've come by train. Obviously, we've not formatted this. Quite a few users coming by train today. Cool. So yeah, a really nice way of visualizing that data, and you can see then quite a few from Swansea, quite a few from Cardiff as well. Yeah, good job. Any questions before I finish? Brilliant. Deal from Barbara. Responses. Are we handed over to?
Yeah, I'll lay the next one up. Thanks very much, Josh. It was a really interesting talk. Completely unbiased opinion, but the tool and the whole Data Map Wales platform just does look really good. So next up, we have Daniel Cluley from the Plymouth Marine Laboratory on building the Welsh data cube. Fits in quite nicely with Paul mentioning it as part of his session a little bit earlier, all the Earth observation data. So find out more about that any second now. Over to you, Dan. Thank you.
Can you hear me like this, or don't you? Is this good? Cool. So I'm Dan Cluley. I'm from Plymouth Marine Laboratory, and I'm going to talk a little bit about the Welsh Data Cube and how that fits in with the Living Wales project. So first of all, just a little bit of background. So Living Wales was established as a research project in 2018 under the European Regional Development Fund Sir Cymru programme with support from the Welsh Government. And so the aim was really to look at how Earth observation data, and primarily data from satellites, but also some drones as well, could be used to characterise, map and monitor the national landscape of Wales. So this is producing maps and then how they can be used. So in 2021, it started being moved into the second phase, so Living Wales Phase 2, and that was more into looking at how we can translate that capability from a research project into something that can start being used in Welsh Government and by the various agencies. And we've just started the third phase, which is Phase 3, and that's really looking at how we can actually move that to more operational system with dedicated support. So I was involved in the second phase and the third phase. So Plymouth Marine Laboratory Applications, which is a commercial spin-off of PML, are looking after that operation of the data cube and some of the moving that across, which I'm going to talk about a little bit later. That's kind of a really high-level overview of Living Wales. So I thought I'd take a little bit of a step back and ask why build a data cube for Wales. So one of the primary reasons is that we needed a framework for all these products being generated from Earth observation data as part of Living Wales. So it wasn't just using loads of different software packages, there was some commonality there. And ideally, this should also be used to support Earth observation data in government. So the idea of having this common framework, so the research team at Aberystwyth can be using it, but also people in government can be using the same package. And there's also an international link as well, though. So we're, as part of the research we're doing, we're also working with other projects in Australia and Switzerland, and they're using data cubes as well. And there's real benefit to collaborating with these organisations because it means we can reuse some of their algorithms, we can learn from their shared experiences. We're not having to build everything up from scratch. So in terms of what the overall Living Wales system should look like, what we're kind of aiming for is we've got these Earth observation data coming from satellites from various providers. So primarily using the Copernicus series of satellites, so Sentinel-1, Sentinel-2, and also the USGS operated Landsat, just because it gives the long time series going back to the 80s. And the idea is that the satellite data, both the archive and newly available streams when they're required, will be converted to an analysis-ready data product. So it's something that people can just start using. And then this will sit as a large archive of data. And this will be indexed into some kind of database that we can pull data out as needed and perform analysis on that to make different products and export those and also make those available for users. So in terms of some of the core technologies we're using, it's built around three main core technologies. The first one is EODataDown, and this is a Python library with a Postgres database. It was written by Pete Bunting at Aberystwyth University, and it's based heavily on RSGIS and some of the other software he's written. And the aim of this is to take data, find data from the different providers, download that data, convert it to an analysis-ready data product, and then also generate some quick looks and map tiles as well, so it's easy to view those products. And then on top of that, there's a Flask web app, which allows data to be searched and also downloaded. So this eData Down was written before the project and used for other things, and then we made some adjustments as part of the product in terms of how we did that analysis-ready data conversion. So for Sentinel-1, we're using Snap as a backend to download the data and georeference it, and also to make sure it's in British National Grid. And for Sentinel-2 data, we're downloading the atmospherically corrected data straight from ESA rather than doing our own atmospheric correction. And this is just for consistency with other things as well. And it's ESA have done a lot of work in their own atmospheric correction, so it allows us to build on that. One of the important things that we do as part of the analysis-ready data is we convert it to British National Grid. Analysis-ready data, there are definitions for it, but actually what it means to different people can sometimes vary. And for using in Wales, actually having something in British National Grid is really important. So you can just drop it in and it lines up with other layers. So that's getting data from the data providers and having a file that's analysis-ready data, ready to do some analysis with, and also ready to visualize in a small front end and to view. The second technology we use, which a lot of it is based around, is called Open Data Cube. So it's a Python library. There is one main library and then a couple of other libraries around that that do different things. It's open source. It was led a lot by Geoscience Australia, but there's also been a lot of other contributors to that. And the basic way that works is it has a Postgres database, and every analysis-ready data file you have, you index that within the database, and then users are able to use this Python library to query the dataset and get their data. So that box in the top right just shows an example of the query. So it's essentially in those couple of lines of code, you specify the product you want. So in this case, it's Sentinel-2 optical data. You specify the bounding box you want. You specify the time period you want. And then it returns as an X-ray dataset, which is quite a common Python library for analyzing data, and it has lots of other things built on top of that. One of the nice things about using X-ray is we can use a library called Dask, which allows lazy loading of data, and then you can do parallel processing. You can spin up various worker nodes, so you can actually do some quite large data processing using it. This is an example of some of the large processing we can do. So we had a previous project where we were using Open Data Cube to generate land cover maps for Australia. So using the Landsat archive, we generated for the whole of Australia at 30-meter resolution and using 30 years worth of data. So we know this library really can scale to these massive data sets. So actually having that ability to go from small pilot studies to scaling it up is really important, really useful. It also allows us to do virtual products. So although we've got the satellite data index, we can have algorithms that compute new products on the fly. And this is quite useful if we don't want to store every data set. So we could have, for example, a virtual project for different band indices. And then as users load that, it will calculate that and return the data set that they are interested in rather than the raw satellite data. And then the third core technology we use is Jupyter Hub. So this provides a mechanism of allowing multiple users to have Jupyter notebooks with a set of environment linked to our storage and with all the different libraries they need installed. So we looked at some different ways of providing that, and we settled on Zero to Jupyter Hub, which uses Kubernetes. So it's deployed as a Helm chart, if anyone's familiar with Kubernetes, and it's very configurable in terms of the resources and the libraries which we've installed. So we use Docker containers to provide a consistent environment for all users, and so we can have all the libraries they need installed. Primarily, people are interacting with it with Python because the Open Data Cube is a Python environment, but there is potential to install other things like R within there. It also provides a simple Linux command line, so users can use command line tools as well. They can pip install new packages as they want to. So it actually provides a lot of flexibility, and we can provide users with compute resources that they might not have on their own local machine as well. So that Jupyter Hub allows them to interact with the Open Data View and access all that massive archive of data. So there's, I think, about 30 terabyte archive of satellite data, and just pull that in and do some work with it. So in terms of the current deployment, how we've currently got it working at the end of phase 2, we currently have a single server set up within Supercomputing Rails, and we're using, for EO data down and the EO data down front end, we're using 2 containerization technologies. We're using Singularity for EO data down, just because it involves using elevated permissions, and it's a very HPC way of doing containers. And then the front end, because it's more web, we just use the traditional Docker. To deploy the Jupyter Hub instance, we're using microcase. And for some of the batch processing, where we need to do larger runs to generate national scale data sets, we've done some stuff with GNU Parallel. So in terms of getting things running, this is set up, it works. However, we're rapidly outgrowing this single server setup, so we are going to start migrating things away, and I'll go on to that in a little bit. But first, I just wanted to show some outputs of things that are possible with the setup we've been using. So the first is these national land cover maps, and we saw in Paul's talk earlier overlaying some of those. So these are at 10-meter resolution, and for using all available data from a particular year, for every 10-meter pixel, it has the land cover class for those, which is really useful for various applications. But the really interesting thing is being able to look at the change. And having this framework set up, so we've got a pipeline for ingesting new data and indexing it and applying algorithms in a scalable way, means as new data becomes available, we can update these maps. So initiatives such as replanting forests, this gives a tool to monitor the progression of those forests as they go. It also allows us to look if there's areas where land is degrading. So just by having these data sets and being able to update them, it gives us a tool to answer lots of questions, and also linking with other data sets as well. So this is land cover. And then one of the things we can do from the land cover maps is we can translate them into habitat maps. So this is something that a lot of people want, actually, not just the land cover, the actual habitat classes, because then we can start answering other questions and integrating with different frameworks there. Another example tool which has been done with this on a more regional scale is flood mapping. So I showed the query earlier where you can just select a time series of data, and it ends up returning all the satellites seen within that time series. What's really cool about that is then that means you can apply one algorithm, in this case, to detect floods, to that whole stack of data. And it's using Sentinel-1 star data, which, if anyone's not familiar, it's an active Earth observation sensor that operates at microwave wavelengths, which means it's insensitive to cloud cover, but it is sensitive to slightly different things on the surface. So one of the things is it's sensitive to roughness. So where you have flooded areas and the roughness of the surface changes, then that gives a very, very different response. So that can be utilized to map where areas are flooded. So by having all these scenes and being able to quickly analyze those, you can do some quite cool things like produce these maps of water frequency during a particular month for a particular area. And because we've got the whole pipeline of downloading new data and adding new scenes, this can keep being updated as well. So we can look at tracking progress as things happen. And normally there's about a day or so latency between the satellite acquiring a scene and it being available for analysis. So that's a really nice tool of being able to actually monitor things and take these algorithms, developed on an archive of data and start applying them as things are actually happening and then getting information out to people. And I know for some of the floods that have happened in Wales, NRW have been using some of the Sentinel-1 data to look at things as well, and sometimes that's just visual, sometimes it's actually doing some analysis. And then the other output which I wanted to highlight, which I think is probably one of the more important outputs, is actually the training material. So it's really great having this good system and people being able to log on it, but actually doing the material so people can use it is the really important bit. So one of the parts of the project which Carol from Aberystwyth University did a lot of work on is writing these notebooks to really guide people through the process and explain what's happening. So the nice thing about Jupyter Notebooks is you can have multiple material and you can have images and videos and links to other things. So these notebooks really step through the process of what you can do with this data cube system and how you can monitor things. So there is an example of the flood mapping in there, and it goes through all the different steps, and it tells users, change this to set your area, you can change these dates here to set different dates, so they can step through those notebooks. And the idea is to go from these large data set of Earth observation data into something that can be, say, added directly into reports. So get a plot at the end that can add it into reports, or a CSV file that can be used in Excel. So one of the examples is looking at different areas. So just being able to export that CSV file in Excel and then do the analysis from that, that's really useful, that's powerful, having that whole big data set and condensing it into something we could use in Excel. There's also the option just to put things in traditional GIS packages as well. So there's an example in the training material of doing a cloud-free mosaic. So taking a time series of data and from there, gap filling the clouds. So you just get one image covering a particular area that doesn't have clouds that can then be loaded into a GIS package. And doing that the traditional way of downloading lots of scenes, processing them, analysing them, that's days and days of work. So being able to do that in a couple of minutes within a notebook, I think that's a really powerful thing. So that's kind of where the project has been and how we got to. So I'm just going to talk quickly a little bit about future plans. So the aim is to continue supporting more users. We've already got some people using the system. We've had some good feedback about the material that's there. We've had some problems with performance, as Paul had mentioned. The team at Aberystwyth are still going to be continuing some of their research to look at new products, and as part of that, continuing international links. In terms of addressing some of the limitations and scaling it to more users, we've got a plan to move the entire thing from a single server over to Microsoft Azure. And we get two benefits of that. The first is it allows much better separation of resources. So rather than having one server and everything, we can have a separate web server. We can spin up servers as needed to do the analysis-ready data processing. It also means we can scale better to meet user demand. So at the moment, that Jupyter Hub instance, that can only support a finite number of servers, and that's of users, and that's determined by the resources of the servers. Whereas when we move to the cloud, we're able to scale. So if we want to run a workshop with lots of users, we're able to add more instances and do that. And we're also able to add resources with, say, more CPU or more RAM for more demanding users. And we're also looking to better integrate with Data Map Wales as well, and looking at how some of the data that have been produced from this can be made available from Data Map Wales, where there's common links, if there's common resources on Azure as well, where we can find common ground on that. So thank you for listening. If there's any questions, let me know.
Thanks very much, Dan. That was really, really interesting. If there's no questions, we'll move on to last session before lunch. There's so much to take in from some of these talks that it'll take a second viewing online, maybe. But like I said, the PDFs and the videos will be available. Okay, so I'll let Google in then.
really. Okay. Foreign computer. And I was dragging it over to the screen. Sec. Very good. Can we get rid of the menu bar on the bottom of this? Hello, my name's Matt Walker. This is Rhys. I'm from Aston Technology. Rhys is from Ramblers Cymru, and we're here to talk about a project called Paths to Wellbeing. It's a joint presentation. So Rhys is going to take us through introductions to Ramblers Cymru itself and an overview of the Paths to Wellbeing website. And then I'm going to go through a whole host of technical items that follow on. So we'll do a demo of the site, go through technically how it's put together, and then some of the details behind the scenes. I think we've got a half hour. We can try and do 50-50 about that. Let's see how we go. We'll see.
Hi everyone, my name's Rhys, as it says. I am a delivery officer for Ramblers Cymru, and I don't actually know that much about GIS. I'm more of an interested observer, so sorry guys. So I just wanted to tell you a little bit about the project. So Ramblers Cymru is, we're kind of known as a walking charity, but actually we like to think of ourselves as a bit more of a community development charity. So our idea with Paths to Wellbeing was to help us achieve our vision, which was to help everyone find their feet. So we're aiming to improve confidence for people in the outdoors and allow people who may feel unable to access nature the chance to feel comfortable in finding information and putting basic level navigation skills into practice. Around 70% of people over 60 in the UK, they're unable to lift their legs over hip height. So any sort of coming across stiles or anything like that, they don't have access to those things. So that's key to the kind of thing that we're trying to do. So we also want a Wales that's designed for walking. So at the moment, around half of the current right-of-way network in Wales is in an incredibly neglected state, and a lot of it is impassable. So therefore, access to the outdoors and nature is restricted. And then the other thing that was part of our vision is putting walking at the heart of communities. So access to the outdoors has been shown in a variety of different studies to have a direct effect on stated levels of health and well-being within communities. By targeting areas with high levels of deprivation through the Welsh Index of Multiple Deprivation scores, we hope to be of benefit within these communities. So we had a lot of aims and outcomes. I could spend a long time talking about them, but I won't. So I'll just go over them quickly. But the idea is to talk to the community about what, where and why they needed to improve or create green space and infrastructure. To allow a community to have ownership of their local area, its features and the maintenance of the place they call home. To teach and allow access to knowledge about sustainability through partner organisations such as the Woodland Trust and the Wildlife Trust. Skills which are highly likely to be needed in the long-term future of these communities, and as already mentioned, improve health and well-being outcomes through activity within the community. So across Wales and in each region, we chose 3 local communities based on a variety of different factors, including their wind scores and considering local access to the right-of-way network. So these are the communities that we had. We had quite a few of them, but we are a charity with limited resources, so we could only focus on 3 communities within each area. So, our outcomes were we wanted to have physical improvements. So we had physical improvements that we were able to install. Once the trickier aspects of landowner permission were sorted, we installed fencing, gates and benches, cleared vegetation, and gave each community the tools to allow them to continue to maintain their local path network. And as you can see, we made some quite nice sculptures and put in some nice benches that make these rights-of-way network just a bit more attractive to people to come out and actually use. So we also wanted to look at things like youth engagement. We worked with schools and youth groups, scouts and brownies. We were actively targeting young families to allow children and parents to experience and see the outdoors as that fantastic resource for the future. Sort of anecdotally, my feeling is that there is a lot of separation between people now and the outdoor environment. And one of the aims of Ramblers Cymru is to actually come along and make that separation smaller. So it was very important to us to start working with young people because they are the next generation who will be interested and hopefully be going out and doing this stuff. So as you can see, everyone had a lovely time. And we did lots of waymarking. Waymarks all went up and allow safer and easier navigation for some of the routes that we had. We built in each community, we built 8 different routes, 2 of which had to be family friendly. So we ended up with quite a lot of maps. All of that was done on OS maps and then given over to Aston Technology to work their magic on. The other thing we wanted to look at was citizen science. And we wanted to basically improve and enhance biodiversity along rights of way by planting trees and holding invasive species removals days in partnership with other organisations. So these partnerships were extended to helping with research for the same organisations. We were part of the City Nature Challenge, which was a global thing, just documenting biodiversity in each particular area. And another important thing that we looked at was diversity. We were working with the Welsh Refugee Council, and we worked hard to encourage that equality and diversity. We reached out to a lot of these different organisations. One of the big things for us as well is accessibility and making sure that at least some of the routes that we had, obviously with the environments they were in, they couldn't all be completely accessible to everybody, but we tried to make as much as we could accessible when we could. So wasn't this an Aston Technology presentation? Yes. So if we go back to we needed those maps, we needed them to be on a website that people could access easily, and we also needed information boards that could be put right in the centre of those communities where people could access it. And as you can see, there's an example of one there, which also has the links to the website which Aston Technology worked with us on. So all of that was supposed to be tied to Ramblers Cymru website through a microsite and gives us online access for all of it. And the reason that we worked with Aston was that we'd worked with them before and they were good. So we wanted to keep going with that. Yes, as an example of the detail we were able to achieve on our leaflets, this was kind of the end product that Aston gave us. And all of this navigation tool is available on the website. I won't go into it too much because I don't want to take up too much of Matt's time. But just to keep a reminder for you, that is in the end what we managed to do as part of the whole project. There's certainly a lot of it, and if you have any more questions about it, please feel free to ask me at the end. Not quite 15 minutes. Sorry.
All right. Thanks, Reece. It's great. My slides look ever so dull, don't they, compared to Reece's? Very boring. It's really nice to have Reece here to kind of give some context to this. The rest of my talk's very much kind of technical in-depth type stuff, but it's really nice to hear about the reason for these sorts of projects and the impact that they can have. We've been working with Ramblers, both GB and Ramblers Cymru for some time. We manage for them what they call the GeoHub, which is a Postgres database with a number of tools and services wrapped around it. And they use that for managing their route data We use it for the data that's in the Don't Lose Your Way project, which looks to identify and then apply for historic rights of way, and a whole host of other things within the Ramblers portfolio of geospatial data. As you'd imagine, a lot of what they work with is geospatial. We were asked about this particular project, and these were the requirements. So we had a handful of content pages. It's a very small site just to showcase this particular project. It used to be Ramblers branded. At the time, they were going through a rebrand, so we had a whole host of new branding materials to work with, and of course, it needed to be bilingual. Needs to include a web map. So there's about 140 walking routes with 17 communities. Categorised by whether they're family friendly or the individual difficulty ratings, which are consistent with the rest of the Ramblers routes available on their main website. Needs to be a simple gazetteer search and a choice of base mapping. So really quite a simple web mapping setup. Needs to be fast and easy to use, resilient and low cost to maintain, and the content needs to be updated by Ramblers staff. So this is just now to take you through kind of what we've done and how I've implemented that. Start with a little demo. Let's do a live demo. Why not? What on earth could go wrong? So this is the landing page. So you get to choose your language at this point. I'm of course going to choose English for my ease of use. Then drop down into the main home page, which again gives some contextual information. So these are just some examples of the content pages that are available. And some context around the Pastor Wellbeing project itself. The meat of the site is over in the routes page, and the routes page here loads up. You get a simple panel with hopefully some easy to understand instructions. You get a search box with autocomplete, allows you to zoom down to a given area. Actually, if I just zoom back up a little, that was mouth wheel. Yeah, I have. You can also click on each of these to zoom down, and then we start displaying the individual routes, displays with a nice legend and the ability to toggle between the two different sorts of classification and some instructions alongside. And then you can just click through and hover to get high-level information, and click for a little bit more and panel along for info. All fairly standard stuff. All nice and quick and hopefully easy to use. Provide like the pertinent information up here in the panel, and then links to download some further information. So there's a route guide for each of them as a PDF. You can just download to your phone or some other device and use offline. Could print out. We know that some individuals still like to have a paper map in front of them that you can take out into the field. There's also the option to download a GPX. So I'll come on to that shortly, but essentially we have the source data and create individual GPX files for each of those routes available. And then there's also a community leaflet, which is a leaflet that includes information about the whole of the community and each of the walks that are available. So a little bit of content management for each of these, and some images. Managed to land on quite an attractive one there. Some aren't quite so, but that kind of gives you a flavour for the route. The idea is you browse about, find a route you're interested in, download the GPX or the leaflet, and then hopefully go out and walk the thing. Back to here. So that's the site in a nutshell. Data itself was maintained in QGIS. So all of the layouts for the PDFs and the like, that was all generated within QGIS. All of the data management, so collating the data from the individual communities, digitizing the routes, etc. That was all done in QGIS too. We can't claim credit for all that. A team at Ramblers were involved with doing most of the work actually within QGIS itself. We provided a bit of support around how to do certain things within QGIS, but the Ramblers company team really responsible for collating that data, cleaning it, and providing and producing each of those outputs as PDFs. Did a really nice job. Just shows what can be done with free and open source software. Really professional looking map production. The data itself was then provided as a geo package and loaded into the Ramblers GeoHub. We transformed it then in Postgres, onto that shortly, and exported it as GeoJSON and GPX. I think it's funny, we've got LTE there, should be ETL, shouldn't it? But it's never that way around. So we did a bit of L and then a bit of T and then a bit of E to get us to where we need. On the software side, that kind of like preps all the data, gets us ready so that we could then display it. We've then got a multilingual 11T website. So 11T is a static site generator. That basically means that you have a bunch of content on your machine. Some of that can be static content, some of it can be dynamic. You run a process and end up with basically what you think of like a traditional old website that could just be served from a regular web server without any dynamic capability. So really dirt simple website. The benefit of this is that it can be hosted very cheaply and it's incredibly resilient. So you haven't got to worry about servers being up and monitoring resource on servers. Essentially, if there's a web server that's up and running, then you're good to go. It allows you to make use of a whole host of static site hosting facilities. The map itself is an open layers map. It's a JavaScript map. Do a lot of work with open layers. Very nice library for building interactive maps. Got a TV on idle. We then hosted it, both the source code on GitHub, and then we published the site to AWS Amplify. Through of those. This was data capturing QGIS, the interface that you all know and love. So yeah, and the data itself was maintained in geopackaging. There were individual geopackages which were merged into one with consistent schema. The data here is also captured as bilingual. And it's got different attributes with things like the description, etc., in the appropriate language. There was a bit of work to clean up the data to ensure that things like the digitizing direction matched the walking direction, those sort of things. When we came to export to GPX, found that some routes were like multi-part polylines, and that they kind of started here, went round, and then back on itself, that sort of thing. So there's a bit of work to clean the data up in that regard, but otherwise fairly simple data set. We've got some workflow behind the scenes. We're using the OGR library, which is everyone knows and loves, part of the GDAL or Google suite of tools that allow you to translate geospatial data from one format to the other. Here we're going from geopackage to Postgres. We transform within Postgres itself, a bunch of SQL. Very simple to take a source data set and transform it into various forms. Here we transform it from its source structure into something that's compatible with the overall Ramblers route set, so that we can in future publish these routes as part of their route library. And then we transform it into another representation which is suitable for the website here. By that, I mean that we take the data out of Postgres and publish it as language-specific GeoJSON. So the base is 2 GeoJSON files. The whole lot's just in 2 GeoJSON files. So that works with the static website. Essentially, the website contains a couple of files, and they're loaded up by the map to display. Again, using OGR to write out the GeoJSON, and then we have some processes to just write out an individual GPX for each of those. Again, that uses OGR under the hood. So it's just a relatively straightforward import, transforming the database itself, and then export in a couple of different formats. So we end up then just with a couple of files on disk, and we're able to then just add those to a repository alongside this 11T website. So within the website, we've got all the content, we've got a couple of GeoJSON files and the GPX, we've got the PDFs, everything that's needed to build the entire site, and we run a process and get out basically a directory full of the website content pre-built. I said we use OpenLayers for the web mapping. We do a lot with OpenLayers at Aston. We find it very flexible toolkit, works with a whole host of different services. So the OGC services, it has support for a whole host of different data formats out of the box, and generally provides a nice smooth user experience that's also quite crucially compatible with lots of devices. We haven't done many websites that use, say, Mapbox.gl as yet, which is a newer library that supports rendering vector tiles in particular, because we find that actually when you come to it, there isn't good enough support on end users' devices. Not everybody's got a high-end iPhone not everybody's got a laptop that's capable of running smoothly with large width maps. So quite often we'll be using open layers with the canvas rendering technology. You get good performance, nice solid user experience, and good compatibility across the board. We also use Svelte for some of the user interface components. I don't know if anybody's done any web development. In the last 5 years or so, there's been an explosion in different ways of writing GUIs for web applications. Svelte's one of the current technologies for that. We find it works very well with open layers. You can basically write a templated version of so that panel down the side, and then just fill in the appropriate data. It handles updating the user interface within the browser itself. Then on the other side, all of this went into a repository that's up on GitHub. Just open that. Released as open source, of course. So that's under the Aston Technology account. Ramblers don't currently have one, so we host several repositories on their behalf. And that provides you basically with the source code that would be needed to build the entire site and host it yourself. One of the other benefits that we found of GitHub was it basically gave us cheap content management. So Joe Marshall-Mills, who was one of the technical individuals at Ramblers Cymru, was involved with pulling the data together and the content for the site. And you see the latest commit on here is Joe's. He signed up for a GitHub account. We added him to the team within our organization, and then he is able to edit the files, and actually did most of his work actually in the GitHub interface itself. You know, he needs to change some text, he needs to upload a new PDF, all those sorts of things. And it meant that we didn't have to go and build anything specific to do content management. We just used what was already there, and that worked out really well. Obviously a slight learning curve. If you've never used GitHub before, you need to get used to how that works. But actually we found that using the interface, as opposed to having to clone a repository locally, make your changes, commit them, push them back up, you know, the whole developer workflow, Joe didn't have to get involved with that. He could just make his changes within the GitHub website itself. And when he made a change, he can write a commit message right there in GitHub, and you've then got a change history. So it's worked out really well. In the site itself, in the repository itself, there are a couple of branches. There's a main branch and there's a prod branch. Prod is the actual live website. Main is basically the work in progress as we go along. That brings me on to my last point, which is how we deploy it. So we use AWS Amplify, which is like software as a service offering by Amazon. So there you basically configure it to say, I'd like to build a website based on this code, and you point it actually at the GitHub repository, and it will automatically take the source code, build it. You provide a short script to say how that's done. So in this case, you need Node.js, so you need a certain version of Node.js, and you need to run this script that's defined in the repository, and it will go through, run that whole build process for you, and create the output, and then copy it up to, in this case, Amazon's S3, sort out the certificates and all that jazz to then have the website hosted up at the Paths to Wellbeing URL up there. So it does a really nice job of basically providing you like a continuous integration pipeline with very little effort required from your part. Once you've got a site that can be built locally, it's not too much of an effort to then get it built up in the cloud with AWS. It's very cheap also, AWS Amplify. We're just using some static features, basically paying for storage and a tiny amount of compute to actually generate the site. Yeah, so we're really quite pleased with how that's worked out. The site's up there for anyone that's interested. I haven't put a slide on what's next. Potentially there's other sites to come based on the same.
Yeah, I mean, the project Paths to Wellbeing has now become several mini projects that are all going to be run with local authorities. So I'm currently doing the Monmouthshire one, which is now called Paths to Communities, which is a slightly different play on exactly the same thing. So that's what we'll be doing. We are working with the local authorities to kind of make to get involved with their level of surveying and being able to put that data in for us. Whether we can then make it something else is something subject to the local authorities wanting us to. But each project is going to be happening in each different region of Wales. There is currently one in Denbighshire. Bids are in for the others, and they should hopefully be finalised very soon. But we're not sure. When it comes to funding, that's always a bit of a tricky one.
Cool. Yeah, and essentially, the work's been done at this point to put the technology together. Should be reproducible. If you want to extend the existing site, that's possible, or indeed produce another microsite of a similar ilk. Most of the work's been done. Just a case of processing the new data. Thank you very much. If you've got any questions, I'm happy to take them now, or you can catch us.
Yes, good question. I think obviously our leisure countryside market is very useful for this. I think it's very nice, something like Scotland would be a very easy way to embed the right data into our websites. And if you work closely with us as well, we can like data onto our country. Because we've got really conservative walks, gross paths as well. And working closely with you, I think that would make sense, obviously. It's just feeding the data across.
So it is data that you've got already within your holding. Yeah, so Mike's talking there about, so we provide a product for local authority called iShare. iShare has a web mapping capability for local authorities' websites, and there's a particular piece of that called Spotlight, which allows you to fairly easily author a web map by choosing the layers you want and just the extent, that sort of thing. Yeah, you could definitely use Spotlight to publish the data. Probably for Ramblers Cymru, one thing that'd be useful would be publish that data as a web map for the end users, but also make it available as a WFS, say. Yeah, and then it could be easily imported, yeah, and then displayed elsewhere within Ramblers if you want to promote that. Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
I probably know you less than pleased about the GIS. I know you did pastoral being sites. You go in as a normal user. Just like back.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
When it's asked the English,
I did.
It's amazing how many Welsh names are on the map. That's an ordnance survey.
You're amazed at the Ordnance Survey. We have a representative from the Ordnance Survey here. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, so we did actually talk to, is anyone here from the OpenStreetMap Wales project? Yeah. So we spoke to you with Joe, didn't we? Sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We've been in touch.
Yes, and yeah, we inquired as to whether we might be able to use it. It turns out that we couldn't. I think it was the cost constraint. It was very low budget project for the website. Yeah, and this is the standard OS Maps API outdoor base map, I think it is. And then there's also the option to use the OpenStreetMap. Yeah, so nothing special is what I'm saying in terms of base mapping here, just using what the Ordnance Survey provide via the OS Maps API.
Yeah, I mean, that's just crazy. They locally, those would call, the locals would call that an industry fair, what they call it, just industry fair mountain. It's got Welsh language, 3 inches of Welsh language. I don't know how it's ended up so Welsh language.
You said it's more Welsh language than you'd expect?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
The locals would prefer to.
Oh, funny.
It's mountain.
Yeah.
Yeah. Certain parts of the valleys, they would definitely be speaking some of the language.
I know, yeah. Yeah, schools. But yeah, it's nice things to do.
Yeah, I think it's just the default in OS Maps now. Yeah, you get the appropriate language for the area. Yeah. Right. Hello?
I was just noticed that you've got a link on there to Google Maps here to get to start. I was just wondering whether you explored or have any ambition to have an even sort of turn-by-turn routing for the walks themselves. Use some like PG routing to kind of break down the routes a little bit more, give that sort of step-by-step.
Yes, of the actual routes for walking. Yeah, I don't know.
Well, we do have we have put descriptions in on if you click into one of the routes
on the route guides.
The descriptions are there. That was a rather painful process by all the delivery officers going around and then suddenly realising that no one knew their lefts from their rights.
Yeah.
Yeah, they are there. Making them a bit better, possibly, is something that we could do. Making them so they work with GPX. But again, you're getting out of my remit here.
Yeah, so currently on the GPX download, you've got both the route and the waypoint. So each of those waypoints in here, actually, am I right saying that? Not sure, I might retract that. Not sure. But there certainly is there's the ability with the GPX format, isn't there, to have a route and waypoints associated with them. Yeah, so then you can get descriptions as you go.
One of the problems was we built the routes, we designed the routes on OS maps, and then Joe was able to then turn that into something that he could put onto QGIS. Some of the delivery officers found using OS maps a little bit tricky at times with the waypoints. At that time, I think the Snap2 tool wasn't as good as it is now. Certainly, I don't have any problem using the OS Maps Snap2 tool. So all of the routes were built in OS Maps and then transferred onto QGIS by Joe, again in a somewhat painful process, as this isn't our area of expertise.
I think one of the good things to know is if it runs along a public right of way as well, if it contains it, so if you have an issue with a certain section of what you need, you can actually go straight to council and say, well, it's built with this section, and can you build your specifications as well?
Yeah, well, so the new projects as they go ahead, certainly my project in Monmouth, we are working quite closely with Monmouth Council, and they have said that they would like to train us up to use their surveying systems. So originally we were capturing data ourselves, but now certainly they're talking about using QField and giving us training on using QField so that we can go out and survey that data. Yeah, so it is something that we did, but then we rapidly discovered everyone else was better at it than us. I think we stored most of ours on Excel with pictures. That took a while for Joe to go through. He struggled a little bit with it. He got a bit tense.
Cool. Thank you very much. Sign back out. Can you just close that? Yep. Yeah, we're back to there. Lovely.
Thank you very much. That was really interesting. So I think we've finished right on time for lunch and smelling good at the back of the room. So yeah, we'll break here for an hour and come back at 1:45 for the afternoon sessions, please. Thanks very much.